Amanda Carson was a college student with big dreams. Jessica Fields was a dedicated high school teacher. And Emily Harper was a young medical assistant just starting her life. But all three would become unwillingly bound together in a horrifying story of abduction and murder, orchestrated by a predator who lurked in the shadows of their quiet town. In the summer of 2016, the small town of Willow Creek was cloaked in a serene sense of safety. Nestled amidst rolling hills and thick forests, it was the kind of place where people rarely locked their doors and neighbors greeted each other by name. That peace was shattered when Amanda Carson, a 21-year-old college student, disappeared without a trace. Amanda was well known in the community, not just for her bright smile, but for her ambition and drive. She was studying biology at a nearby university and working part-time at the local cafe to save money for a research trip abroad. Her disappearance was both baffling and chilling. It started on an ordinary Friday evening. Amanda finished her shift at the cafe just as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky with hues of orange and purple. Surveillance footage later confirmed that she had exited the cafe around 8:45 p.m., carrying her usual tote bag. She waved goodbye to her coworker before walking toward the parking lot, her ponytail swinging with each step. From there, Amanda simply vanished. She never made it home, and her phone went straight to voicemail when her family tried calling her later that night. By the following morning, Amanda's parents, Tom and Mary Carson, were frantic. They reported her missing to the Willow Creek Police Department, who initially treated it as a case of a young adult possibly staying out late. But as the hours turned into days, and Amanda failed to show up for her weekend plans or respond to texts from friends, it became clear something was terribly wrong. A search party was quickly organized, with dozens of volunteers combing the nearby woods and abandoned buildings. Amanda's car was discovered 2 miles away in a public parking lot, its doors locked and no signs of a struggle. Inside, investigators found her purse, neatly placed on the passenger seat, but her phone and keys were missing. It was a small, unsettling detail, one that hinted at premeditation. The parking lot itself offered no clues, though several surveillance cameras in the area were either broken or pointed away from the scene. The discovery of a single silver earring deepened the mystery. It was found by a local hiker who had joined the search effort in a wooded area about half a mile from the cafe. Amanda's brother, Tom Carson Jr., confirmed that it belonged to her, but the surrounding area yielded no other evidence. The earring raised more questions than it answered. How had it ended up there? And why wasn't there a trail leading to or from the spot? As the days dragged on, hope began to wane. Speculation ran rampant in the community. Some whispered about a stranger who had been seen loitering near the cafe in the weeks before Amanda vanished, while others wondered if someone closer to her might be involved. Rumors aside, one thing was clear. Whoever had taken Amanda knew how to leave no trace. The once idyllic town of Willow Creek now carried a heavy burden, a mystery that refused to be solved. The investigation into Mark Rust's activities gained urgency when a horrifying discovery was made deep in the woods surrounding Willow Creek. A group of hikers enjoying an unseasonably warm winter afternoon stumbled upon what appeared to be a freshly disturbed patch of soil near a secluded trail. Curiosity turned to horror as they uncovered human remains partially buried in a shallow grave. Authorities were called immediately, and the scene quickly became the epicenter of a major investigation. Forensic teams confirmed the remains belonged to Amanda Carson, who had vanished months earlier. Alongside her body were fragments of fabric and jewelry, later identified as a bracelet Amanda was known to wear. Disturbingly, nearby investigators discovered a second grave containing the remains of another woman. The second victim was later identified as Emily Harper, a missing person from a neighboring county. Both women showed evidence of being bound and strangled, and the condition of their remains suggested they had been killed shortly after their abductions. The discovery devastated Amanda's family and reignited fear in Willow Creek. It also confirmed what many had feared. The town was dealing with a predator who meticulously targeted his victims. Investigators reviewed every piece of evidence they had, desperate to piece together the timeline of events. The rusty blue truck spotted near Jessica Fields' home became a critical focus. Surveillance footage from nearby towns began to show a clearer picture of Rust's movements in the days surrounding Amanda's and Emily's disappearances. While sifting through leads, detectives uncovered a chilling detail. Mark Rust had used aliases to rent storage units in various towns. One such unit was located in a neighboring county, and, with a warrant in hand, investigators searched it. Inside, they found what could only be described as a predator's lair. Personal belongings from both Amanda and Emily were discovered, including Amanda's missing phone, now wiped clean of data. Rust's dark obsession with his victims became evident in the grim collection. Pieces of clothing, locks of hair, and even chillingly detailed notes about their routines and habits. The discovery of these items confirmed Rust's involvement and suggested he had been stalking his victims for weeks, carefully planning their abductions. The meticulous nature of his crimes painted a picture of a man who was both calculated and deeply disturbed. Yet, there was no sign of Jessica Fields in the storage unit, leaving hope that she might still be alive. Authorities doubled their efforts to locate Rust, but the trail had gone cold. His truck was nowhere to be found, and tips from across the region led to dead ends. Despite the progress in the case, the discovery of Amanda's and Emily's remains brought a heavy sense of despair. The families mourned their loss, but the town itself felt like it had lost something intangible, a sense of security that might never return. The specter of Mark Rust loomed over Willow Creek, and with Jessica still missing, the urgency to stop him before he struck again reached a fever pitch. The case took an even darker turn when Mark Rust claimed another victim, solidifying his reputation as a calculating and ruthless predator. Emily Harper, a 25-year-old medical assistant from a neighboring town, was abducted in broad daylight from her driveway. The brazenness of the act sent shockwaves through the community, as it seemed Rust was growing more confident and daring. Emily had been loading groceries into her car when she disappeared. Witnesses reported hearing nothing unusual, but a neighbor's security camera captured a grainy image of the rusty blue pickup truck speeding away from the scene. Authorities were now certain they were dealing with the same man. Emily's abduction triggered a massive manhunt. Roadblocks were set up across the region, and Rust's face was plastered on news broadcasts and social media platforms. Law enforcement worked tirelessly, poring over tips and sightings, but Rust was a master at evasion. Investigators suspected he was using backroads and remote areas to stay hidden, avoiding populated places where he might be recognized. With each passing day, the fear that Emily might meet the same fate as Amanda Carson and Jessica Fields grew. Detective Laura Bennett, leading the task force, was determined to stop Rust before it was too late. The break they needed came in the form of a tip from a motel manager in a remote area several counties away. The manager reported that a man matching Rust's description had checked in under an alias and left abruptly a few days later, abandoning several belongings in the room. When officers searched the room, they found more chilling evidence of Rust's crimes, including a map with specific locations marked, places that investigators believed could be potential burial sites. One of these locations, a secluded cabin in the woods, became the focus of the search. The cabin was owned by an out-of-state relative of Rust who had no idea he had been using it. Inside, investigators found signs of recent occupancy, including food wrappers, discarded clothing, and a makeshift bed. Most disturbingly, they found items belonging to Emily Harper, including her purse and a pair of shoes. Forensics teams also uncovered strands of her hair on a blanket, indicating she had been there recently. The discovery raised a glimmer of hope that Emily might still be alive. Meanwhile, as investigators scoured the cabin and surrounding area, Rust managed to slip through their grasp once again. Reports of sightings continued to pour in, but he always seemed to be one step ahead. His ability to evade capture frustrated law enforcement and terrified the public. Rust's knowledge of remote areas and his habit of using abandoned structures to hide made tracking him a nearly impossible task. The race to find Emily intensified as days stretched into weeks. The media dubbed her the final victim, a grim acknowledgement of the likelihood that Rust's spree would end in tragedy. But for Detective Bennett and her team, failure was not an option. With every passing hour, they pushed harder, determined to bring Rust to justice and to save Emily from becoming another name on his growing list of victims. Mark Rust's reign of terror came to a dramatic conclusion 6 months after Emily Harper's abduction. His capture was the result of relentless police work, a tip from an alert citizen, and a stroke of luck. A remote cabin deep in the Montana wilderness, far from the small towns where his crimes had begun, became his final hiding place. Rust had been living there under an assumed name, surviving on stolen supplies and evading detection. Despite his attempts to disappear into the wild, his distinctive rusty blue truck was spotted by a local hunter who had seen the nationwide bulletins. The hunter called the authorities, setting off a chain of events that would finally bring Rust to justice. A SWAT team descended on the cabin in the early hours of a frigid winter morning. The tension was palpable as officers surrounded the property, aware that Rust was both dangerous and unpredictable. When they stormed the cabin, Rust initially resisted, barricading himself inside and threatening violence. After a tense standoff lasting several hours, during which negotiators tried to convince him to surrender, Rust was finally apprehended. Inside the cabin, police found more evidence of his crimes, including personal belongings from multiple victims, detailed journals chronicling his stalking and abductions, and what could only be described as trophies from his victims. But the most crucial discovery was Emily Harper. Emily was found alive, though traumatized, in a hidden room beneath the cabin. She had been held captive for weeks, enduring unimaginable conditions. The rescue was bittersweet. While her survival was a miracle, her physical and emotional scars were a stark reminder of the horrors Rust had inflicted. Emily's recovery would take time, but her survival provided a glimmer of hope for the victims, families, and the communities that had been devastated by Rust's actions. As Rust was taken into custody, the full extent of his crimes began to unfold. Investigators linked him to at least 9 murders across 5 states, though many believed the true number of victims could be even higher. Rust had meticulously planned each crime, choosing his victims carefully and leaving little evidence behind. His journals revealed a deeply disturbed individual, driven by a compulsion to control and destroy, and they provided vital details about several cold cases that had remained unsolved for years. The trial was one of the most high-profile in recent history, drawing national attention. Rust showed no remorse, his expression cold and unyielding, as the evidence was presented against him. Families of the victims filled the courtroom, seeking justice for their loved ones. After weeks of testimony and overwhelming evidence, Rust was convicted on multiple counts of murder, abduction, and assault. He was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole, ensuring he would never harm another person. For the people of Willow Creek and beyond, Rust's capture brought a measure of closure. Memorials were held for the victims, with their families and communities coming together to honor their memories. Though the scars left by Rust's actions would never fully heal, the knowledge that he had been stopped provided some solace. The story of Mark Rust, the Shadow of Rust, became a haunting chapter in true crime history, a chilling reminder of the darkness that can hide in plain sight and the resilience of those who fight to overcome it.